So you read Jennette McCurdy's book, I'm Glad My Mom Died, and now you're obsessed with memoirs, but you don't know what to read next. Don't worry, I've got you covered. Here are my memoir recommendations. Easy first one. Wild by Cheryl Strayed. We have a woman that is dealing with the loss of her mother, ring any bells, and kind of goes off the rails a little bit. She had a good close relationship with her mother, so that's one of the ways they branch off. But there's her just radically like reimagining what her life is like. It's one of those things where it's that pivotal moment of like, okay, well, now everything's different. Who am I? And so Cheryl, in some ways, really like breaks down her life. She has an affair while she's married. She is doing drugs. She has like an eating disorder. Like just all of the things culminate into like this rock bottom moment where she decides to hike the Pacific Crest Trail, the PCT. And on that journey, she like discovers herself. She's able to play back those memories of her mom, of her family, of her brother, and just all these things that have haunted her and kind of physically and mentally move through them. And so I think this is a great next book. If you liked Jennette's story, I think there is that mother-daughter relationship element that's very similar. You have this personal female journey of self-discovery and reimagining of themselves. And so very emotional, very heartfelt, very touching. And yeah, I think you're gonna jive with it. It's again a very poignant story, so make sure you're in the right like headspace for all this stuff. But like, oh, it hits you right here, you know? Then we have H is for Hawk by Helen MacDonald. So this is a father dying this time. So this reflection, this meditation on that father-daughter dynamic. Really interesting because it's through her pursuit to train a hawk, specifically a goshawk, which I guess is like a bigger, harder version of a hawk to train. I don't know. It's been a while since I've read it, but the prose is out of this world. It's so beautiful. And there's this interesting blend of T.H. White's life, who is the author of a little known book called The Wanton Future King. This is like definitely the more literary one of the mix, but I think it can be a great next read if you enjoyed I'm Glad My Mom Died, and especially if you're like, oh, this is great, but I wish it dealt with that father-daughter relationship. So you've got this circumstance of death and grief and reconciling complex relationships because, you know, whether it was an easy, good, close relationship or a dysfunctional relationship, it was still a relationship. And so it was just like psychologically, spiritually, mentally, like emotionally, there's like so much that goes on. And I think this is a really thoughtful exploration of that. So might be worth a read. Then we have The Kiss by Katherine Harrison. Major trigger warnings, red flags here. This is a very dark and taboo, uncomfortable read. She ends up having a sexual relationship with her estranged father. So her father wasn't around when she was growing up. I think she ends up reconnecting with him when she's around 20 or so. So it is dealing with, like, she is so honest and raw and vulnerable. And she doesn't get into crazy graphic details if that's your concern. But if you appreciated Jennette's transparency, her honesty with like really dark and unhealthy situations and things that didn't always put her in the best light, and how do you recover and how do you move from that? How do you grow? How do you live your life? This is a really interesting read. Again, you'll want to be in the right headspace. Just know that it's that kind of subject material up front. But I mean, it's something else when you can turn something like that into, I think memoir at its best is this expansion of what was, and creating this like universal human introspection, this questioning. It's something that touches us and changes us. And yeah, so like this genre asks a lot of its writers and of its readers. And so this book definitely does that. Then we have Fun Home by Alison Bechdel. Got another dead father up in here. Just noticing patterns as I'm explaining them to you. I made this list off the cuff, if you will. And so this is a graphic novel. So there'd be pictures, that's always a plus. And so this is interesting because it's reflections of coming of age, plus sexuality, plus the mystery of her father's death, because it's unclear to this day if it was an accident or if it was suicide, if it was intentional. Also, the reconciling, learning that her father was gay and had these affairs with kind of young men. Very interesting new angle to explore this in a graphic novel sense. And then you have these literary considerations and elements blended in, and the questions of what if, and family, and connections between people. It's like, oh, if that's that, what does it mean about me? Oh, that explains this one element of my childhood, and so on and so forth. And so you have this contemplation of a parent and these complex relationships, these complex circumstances, family dysfunction, and yeah, like an author that's willing to grapple with that in front of you. It's just a really interesting read. Then we have Educated by Tara Westover. This kind of falls in the overlap for dysfunctional families and offbeat, eccentric family situations. Because, you know, you have Jennette with having a Mormon family, very strong thoughts about morality, sexuality, gender, things like that. And then you have Tara Westover's like alternative Christian family, very weird, strict, off-grid kind of upbringing, distrust for the system, and like what it means to come of age in that kind of environment, and what it means to be a child under those circumstances and being raised counter to the rest of the world, and how you find your place after that, when you weren't, what you're being prepared for wasn't the world that exists. How do you succeed? How do you move on? How do you take these weird built-in built-in restrictions and limitations, because some of them are obvious and then some of them are invisible to you until you encounter something in real life where you're like, oh, what do you mean that's not normal? Or, oh, your parents didn't do that? What? So again, it's a really, they really open the door for you and be like, hey, look at this. I just find it fascinating how other people were raised, how other people, what they learned, what they didn't learn. I don't know if you'd call it a parenting technique, because I don't think it's that strategic, but what other people are going through. And I think it really builds your empathy of like, you never know. Like, you know, you bump into a kid at school, you have no idea what's happening in their home life. So I think if that journey and that personal growth through those childhood tribulations is something that interested you about Jennette's story, this would be a good follow-up. And then last, we have Glass Castle by Jeanette Walls. And so again, you have this really alternative family. You have a family member dealing with substance abuse issues. The dad's an alcoholic, if I remember correctly. I think there was also mental health in there. I think he was bipolar. So again, you have this coming of age cocktail of unstable authority figures and peculiar situation where you had to grow up before your time, you know? So like Jennette became hyper aware of her mom, and because of child acting had to have this like unchildlike ability to turn on and off emotions and to like manage herself. And then with Jeanette Walls in Glass Castle, you see how her folks are like, just fend for yourself, forage in the woods. You don't need traditional education, and we believe in your ability to get by. And they're like in houses with no heating, and there's this weird reconciliation between the fact that like you have these good memories and good moments and good feelings interspersed with this really hard situation and this really inappropriate situation for a child to grow up in. So I think it really, all of these memoirs really shed light on our own experiences, our own childhoods, kind of interplaying like, how did that change us? How did that mold us? What things are still left over that we need to sort through? Because we all have it. It might not be as newsworthy as some of them, but it's still there. It still is worth digging and investigating into. So there you have it. Those are some great memoirs to dive into after I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jennette McCurdy. I hope this helps you out, especially if you're new to memoirs. These are all great reads, if I do say so myself. And don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye!